Please, someone help us.
The cry cut through the howling blizzard. Jerome Williams was walking to his broken-down car when he heard it. An elderly white woman, her 5-year-old grandson, trapped in the worst storm the city had seen in decades. Jerome had $3 to his name. His own family was facing eviction, but he didn't think twice. He carried them both 6 blocks through deadly snow, the grandmother on his back, the terrified child in his arms, each step risking his own life. When they reached safety, she tried to pay him. Jerome refused. "Just doing what's right, ma'am." He had no idea who she really was. 3 days later, a black town car pulled up to Jerome's house. The woman inside would make him an offer that seemed impossible. But first, she had to tell him the truth about who he'd saved. But who was Jerome Williams? And why would a simple act of kindness change everything he thought he knew about his future? Let's go back to that morning. 4:30 a.m. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the cold air of a small duplex in Riverside. Jerome rolled out of bed, his joints aching from yesterday's construction work. The apartment was freezing. He'd turned the heat down to save money, again. In the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator. Nearly empty. Half a gallon of milk, some leftover rice, the last box of cereal. He poured the cereal into 2 small bowls, splitting it evenly between his daughters. 8-year-old Zara and 6-year-old Keisha would be up soon for school. Jerome stared at the empty box. No breakfast for him today. "It's okay," he whispered to himself. "Just need to make it to Friday." Friday was payday from his janitorial job. Maybe he could pick up an extra delivery shift this weekend. Maybe Mrs. Peterson would pay him for fixing her fence. Maybe. Jerome touched the photo in his wallet. His wife, Sarah, smiling in her nurse uniform. She'd been gone for 2 years now. Car accident on a rainy Tuesday night, coming home from her shift. "I'm trying, baby," he whispered to the photo. "I'm trying to keep us together." The girls still didn't know how bad things were. Jerome made sure of that. When Zara asked why they couldn't buy new winter coats, he told her they were saving up for something special. When Keisha wondered why they ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights in a row, Jerome made it sound like an adventure. "We're explorers," he'd say, "and explorers eat simple food so they can focus on their mission." "What's our mission, Daddy?" Keisha would ask. "Taking care of each other." At 5 a.m., Jerome kissed his sleeping daughters goodbye and walked to his first job. Janitor at the Meridian Financial Building downtown. 30 floors of offices where people made more money in a month than Jerome made all year. He cleaned their conference rooms, emptied their trash cans, mopped the floors where they walked in shoes that cost more than his rent. But Jerome never felt bitter. His mother had raised him better than that. "Son," she used to say, "your worth isn't measured by your paycheck. It's measured by what you do when nobody's watching." After his janitorial shift, Jerome rushed to his second job, delivery driver for a local restaurant, racing against time to get orders to customers before they complained, hoping for tips that might buy groceries. The delivery van's heater was broken. Jerome's hands went numb gripping the steering wheel, but he smiled at every customer, said thank you, even when they didn't tip. Between deliveries, he thought about Sarah, about the dreams they'd shared, the house they were going to buy, the college funds they were going to start for the girls. Now those dreams felt like fairy tales. On weekends, Jerome worked as a handyman, fixing leaky faucets, repairing broken steps, painting fences. He carried his tools in the same leather pouch Sarah had given him for their anniversary, engraved with the words, "Fix what's broken." It was meant as a joke. Jerome was always tinkering, always trying to repair things around their apartment. But now those words felt like a mission. Fix what's broken. If only he knew how to fix his own life. Jerome's neighbors in Riverside were fighting the same battles. Factory closures had hit the community hard, families struggling to pay rent, kids going to school hungry, but they looked out for each other. Jerome shoveled Mrs. Carter's walkway every morning, carried groceries for Tony, the disabled veteran who lived downstairs. Tony always tried to pay him. Jerome always refused. "We're neighbors," Jerome would say. "Neighbors help neighbors." Most nights, Jerome worked until 9 p.m. Then he'd come home, help the girls with homework, and try to stretch whatever food they had into dinner. The girls never complained. They sensed Daddy was doing his best. "I love you, Daddy," Zara would say, hugging his neck. "Love you too, sweetheart." After the girls went to bed, Jerome would sit at the kitchen table with his bills. The rent notice, the electric bill, the gas bill, numbers that never added up. He'd pull out his phone and look at job listings, construction foreman positions that required experience he had but references he couldn't get. His old company had folded. His supervisor had moved to another state. Jerome had been a good foreman. His crews respected him. Safety was always his priority. But when the construction industry collapsed, good men like Jerome were left behind. Some nights, the weight of it all felt crushing. How was he supposed to provide for his daughters? How was he supposed to give them the future Sarah had dreamed of? But every morning, Jerome got up, put on his work boots, straightened his shoulders. "Fix what's broken," he'd whisper, touching the tool pouch. Today felt like any other day. Jerome finished his janitorial shift at the Meridian building. The weather report was calling for snow, but he'd worked in worse conditions. He was walking to his car when he heard the cry for help. Jerome had no idea that the next 6 blocks would change his life forever, that the elderly woman he was about to carry through the storm would soon make him the most talked-about man in the city. All he knew was that someone needed help, and Jerome Williams had never walked away from someone in need. But Jerome had no idea he was about to walk into the most important moment of his life. It was 2 p.m. when the weather alert came through. Jerome was finishing his shift at the Meridian building, mopping the executive floors on the 15th level. His supervisor burst through the door. "Everyone out, now! Historic blizzard coming in fast." Jerome looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sky had turned an ominous gray. Snow was already beginning to fall. "How historic?" Jerome asked. "Potentially deadly. Temperatures drop 30 degrees in the next hour. Get home, Jerome. Stay safe." Jerome packed his supplies and headed for the parking garage. His beat-up Honda Civic was waiting in the employee section. If he hurried, he could make it home before the storm hit. That's when he heard it. "Please! Someone help us!" A woman's voice, desperate and scared. Jerome turned toward the sound. Near the garage entrance, he saw them. An elderly white woman in an expensive wool coat. A small boy in a private school uniform. They were huddled next to a luxury sedan with its hood up. The woman was well dressed, but she wasn't prepared for this weather. Her shoes were leather flats, not boots. No gloves, no hat. The boy looked about 5 years old. He was crying, his small body shaking. Jerome approached them. "Ma'am, what's the situation?" The woman looked up. Despite her obvious panic, there was something commanding about her presence. She was used to being in control. "Our car won't start," she said. "The battery's dead." "My phone is dead, too. I forgot my charger at home." Jerome knelt down and examined the boy. "Tommy," she called him. His lips were already turning blue. His breathing was becoming labored. "Does he have asthma?" Jerome asked. "Yes," the woman said. "How did you know?" "I can hear it in his breathing." Cold air makes it worse. Jerome's construction experience kicked in. He'd worked enough winter jobs to recognize hypothermia symptoms. The woman's speech was slightly slurred. Tommy's shivering was becoming violent. They had maybe 30 minutes before serious danger. Jerome tried to start his own car. Dead battery. The cold had drained it completely. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Manchester. This is my grandson, Tommy. I'm Jerome, Jerome Williams. Eleanor, I need you to listen to me. This storm is getting worse fast. We can't wait for help. Eleanor tried to stay calm, but Jerome could see the fear in her eyes. How far is your house? 15 miles, she said. But Tommy can't walk in this weather. He can barely breathe. Jerome looked around the parking garage. The wind was picking up. Snow was starting to blow in through the entrance. The temperature was dropping fast. He thought about his own daughters at home. They'd be worried if he was late. Mrs. Carter was watching them, but still. Then he looked at Tommy. The boy was getting worse. His breathing was becoming more labored. Jerome made his decision. There's an emergency shelter at the community center, he said. 6 blocks from here. I can get you both there. Eleanor looked at him with surprise. 6 blocks? In this storm? Tommy can't make it that far. He won't have to walk, Jerome said. I'll carry him. What about me? Jerome looked at Eleanor. She was probably in her 70s, wearing the wrong shoes, already showing signs of hypothermia. I'll help you too, he said. We'll make it together. Eleanor stared at Jerome. You don't even know us. Why would you risk yourself for strangers? Jerome smiled. Ma'am, nobody's a stranger when they need help. He took off his work jacket and wrapped it around Tommy. Hey, buddy, what's your name? Tommy, the boy whispered. Tommy, we're going to play a game, okay? It's called Brave Explorer. I'm going to carry you, and you're going to help me navigate through the snow. Can you do that? Tommy nodded weakly. Jerome fashioned a makeshift sling from his work belt. He positioned Tommy on his back, making sure the boy was secure. Eleanor watched him work. There was something about Jerome's movements, his confidence, that reminded her of someone. Her late son, perhaps, a natural leader. Ma'am, I need you to hold on to my arm, Jerome said. Don't let go no matter what. Can you do that? Eleanor nodded. Her expensive purse fell open, spilling business cards across the garage floor. Jerome glimpsed them but was focused on the emergency. One card caught the light. Expensive paper. Gold embossing. A logo. Jerome vaguely recognized, but there was no time to think about that now. Ready? Jerome asked. Eleanor gripped his arm. I still don't understand why you're doing this. Jerome looked out at the swirling snow. The wind was howling now. Visibility was dropping fast. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. What Jerome didn't know was that Eleanor was studying his face. Something about his selflessness, his instant decision to help, reminded her of the kind of person she'd been looking for her entire career, the kind of person who could change everything. Jerome knew that carrying them both through the blizzard could kill all 3 of them. But what happened next would prove that sometimes heroes are made in the most impossible moments. The storm hit them like a freight train. The moment they stepped outside, the wind nearly knocked Jerome over. Snow whipped sideways, stinging his face like tiny needles. Visibility dropped to less than 10 feet. Tommy whimpered on Jerome's back. Eleanor's grip on his arm tightened. I can't see anything, Eleanor shouted over the wind. I know this area, Jerome called back. Stay close to the buildings. Use them as windbreaks. Jerome's construction experience kicked in. He knew how to navigate in bad weather, how to find shelter, how to stay safe when conditions turned deadly. But this was different. This wasn't just about him anymore. They moved slowly. Jerome testing each step before putting his full weight down. The snow was already knee-deep and getting deeper. Eleanor stumbled. Jerome caught her arm. I've got you, he said. Just stay with me. Tommy was shivering violently despite Jerome's jacket. Is Grandma going to be okay? He whispered. Your grandma's tough, Jerome said. And so are you. We're all going to be okay. But privately, Jerome was worried. Eleanor was struggling more with each step. Her breathing was becoming labored. The cold was affecting her more than she wanted to admit. They made it 1 block, then 2. By the 3rd block, Eleanor collapsed. She went down hard in a snowdrift, her expensive coat soaked through. Her lips were turning blue. "Grandma!" Tommy cried. Jerome knelt beside Eleanor. Her eyes were unfocused. She was mumbling incoherently, severe hypothermia, maybe 10 minutes before it became life-threatening. "Eleanor, can you hear me?" Jerome said. She looked at him but didn't respond. Jerome made a decision that would change everything. He picked Eleanor up in a fireman's carry, one arm supporting her weight, Tommy still clinging to his back. Now he was carrying almost 200 pounds through a deadly blizzard. "Hold on tight, buddy," Jerome told Tommy. "We're going to move faster now." Jerome's legs burned with each step. His lungs screamed in the frigid air. Snow filled his boots, numbing his feet. But he kept moving. Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. The last thing she'd said to him in the hospital. "Take care of our girls, Jerome. And take care of yourself. The world needs good men like you." "I'm trying, baby," Jerome whispered. "Help me get them home safe." Every 50 yards, Jerome stopped under building overhangs, shared his body heat with Eleanor and Tommy, checked their breathing. Eleanor was unconscious now. Tommy was barely responsive. Jerome's own strength was fading. His hands were going numb. His vision was blurring from exhaustion. But he didn't stop. Block 4, Block 5. People who saw them later said it was like watching a man carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Each step is deliberate, each breath a fight against the storm. Jerome's work boots were filled with snow. His clothes were soaked through. But his grip on Eleanor never loosened. His support for Tommy never wavered. "Almost there," he told them. "Almost there." By the time they reached the community center, Jerome was running on pure determination. He pounded on the locked doors with his elbow. "Help! I need help!" The doors flew open. Volunteers stared in shock at the sight. Jerome carrying an unconscious elderly woman, a small boy barely clinging to consciousness. "Get them inside," Jerome gasped. "Hypothermia. The boy has asthma." The volunteers sprang into action. Emergency blankets, warming stations, hot drinks. Jerome collapsed the moment Eleanor and Tommy were safe. "Sir, you need medical attention too," a volunteer said. "Take care of them first," Jerome insisted. Paramedics arrived 20 minutes later. The storm had delayed their response. "You saved their lives," one paramedic told Jerome. 5 more minutes out there and... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Eleanor regained consciousness slowly. The first word she spoke was, "Jerome?" She'd heard his name during the rescue. Even in her hypothermic state, she'd been aware of his sacrifice. Tommy opened his eyes and immediately looked for Jerome. When he saw him sitting nearby, wrapped in a blanket, the boy smiled. "You're like Superman," Tommy whispered. Jerome laughed despite his exhaustion. "Nah, buddy. Superman flies. I just walk really, really slow through snow." Eleanor tried to sit up. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear, focused. She looked at Jerome with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Just seeing you both okay is enough," Jerome replied. But Eleanor kept staring at him. She was studying his face, his mannerisms, the way he interacted with Tommy. She pulled out her phone and made a quiet call. Jerome couldn't hear what she was saying, but her tone was authoritative, commanding, businesslike. When she hung up, she looked at Jerome again. "What's your full name?" she asked. "Jerome Williams, ma'am." Eleanor nodded as if filing that information away. Jerome noticed the business cards scattered around Eleanor's purse. One had fallen face up. He could see part of a logo, something familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Where do you work, Jerome?" Eleanor asked. "I clean offices downtown, do some handyman work on weekends, Whatever keeps food on the table. Eleanor's expression changed. No pity. Something else. Recognition? You have children? 2 daughters. Zara and Keisha. They're probably worried sick right now. Eleanor reached into her purse. Use my phone. Call them. Jerome dialed Mrs. Carter's number. It's Jerome. I'm okay. Just helping some friends. I'll be home for dinner. When he handed the phone back, Eleanor was still watching him intently. Jerome, she said quietly, I hope you know what an extraordinary person you are. Jerome felt uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing what anyone would do, ma'am. Eleanor's smile was knowing, almost mysterious. No, Jerome, not anyone. Believe me, I would know. There was something in her tone, something that suggested she knew more about people than most. But Jerome was too exhausted to think about it. All he wanted was to get home to his daughters. Eleanor reached into her purse with shaking hands. But what Jerome did next would prove he was unlike anyone she'd ever met. The storm was finally calming outside. Emergency transport had arrived at the community center. Eleanor and Tommy were stable, their body temperatures returning to normal. But Eleanor wasn't thinking about going home. She was thinking about the man who'd saved their lives. Jerome, she called softly. He looked up from where he was helping an elderly man in the shelter navigate to the bathroom. Even after his own ordeal, Jerome was checking on everyone else. Eleanor pulled out a thick envelope from her expensive leather purse, several $100s in cash. Please, she said, holding it out to him. This is the least I can do. You risked your life for us. Jerome looked at the money. His eyes widened slightly. He knew exactly how much that envelope could help his family. Rent, groceries, maybe even winter coats for the girls. But he gently pushed the money away. Ma'am, I didn't help you for money. I helped because it was right. Eleanor stared at him. In her world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. But you must, she started, then caught herself. I mean, everyone needs help sometimes. Jerome's stomach growled audibly. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. But he just smiled. I appreciate the thought, but seeing Tommy's smile is payment enough. Tommy was sitting on a nearby chair, color returning to his cheeks. When he heard his name, he looked over and grinned at Jerome. You were so brave out there, buddy, Jerome said to Tommy. Your grandma must be real proud. Eleanor watched this interaction carefully. Jerome's warmth with Tommy was genuine, not performed for her benefit. Please, Eleanor insisted. At least let me do something. Anything. Jerome thought for a moment. Well, if you really want to help, there's a family over there with 3 small kids. They've been here since this morning. I think they could use that money more than me. Eleanor followed Jerome's gaze to a young Hispanic family huddled in the corner. The parents looked exhausted. The children were sharing one small sandwich. You want me to give the money to strangers? Eleanor asked. They're not strangers, Jerome said. They're neighbors. And neighbors help neighbors. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over to the family and handed them the envelope. The gratitude in their eyes was overwhelming. When Eleanor returned, Jerome was kneeling at Tommy's level. You are good for your grandma, okay? Jerome was saying. And remember, you're tougher than any blizzard. Tommy hugged Jerome's neck. Can you come play with us sometime? Eleanor answered before Jerome could. Tommy, Jerome has his own family to take care of. Actually, Jerome said, I'd love to meet Tommy again sometime. If that's okay with you, ma'am. Eleanor studied Jerome's face. You really mean that, don't you? Of course. Tommy's a special kid. Eleanor reached into her purse again. This time she pulled out a business card. At least take this, she said. If you ever need anything. Anything at all. Jerome accepted the card politely. He glanced at it briefly before putting it in his wallet without really reading it. The card read, Eleanor Manchester, Chief Executive Officer, Manchester Foundation. Eleanor noticed Jerome didn't react to the name. He had no idea who she was. Jerome, she said carefully, may I ask what you do for work? I'm a janitor downtown. Do handyman work on weekends. Whatever keeps my daughters fed. Eleanor nodded. Your daughters are lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Jerome said. They're everything to me. A volunteer approached. Ma'am, your car service is here. Eleanor looked toward the door where a black town car was waiting. The driver held an umbrella, ready to escort her to the vehicle. Tommy didn't want to leave. I don't want to say goodbye to Jerome. This isn't goodbye, Jerome promised. I'll see you again soon. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor turned back to Jerome one more time. Jerome, I hope you know what an extraordinary person you are. Just doing what anyone would do, ma'am. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. No, Jerome. Not anyone. Believe me, I would know. She paused at the door. Take care of yourself. And your daughters. Yes, ma'am. You take care of Tommy. After they left, Jerome found a pair of expensive leather gloves on the floor where Eleanor had been sitting. He picked them up, making a mental note to return them. The volunteer who'd been watching shook her head in amazement. In all my years working here, she said, I've never seen anything like what you did today. Jerome was already putting on his damp coat. Just glad everyone's safe. As he walked toward the door, Jerome had no idea that Eleanor was already making phone calls that would change his life forever. As Jerome walked away from the shelter, Eleanor was already making a phone call that would change everything. But he had no idea his simple act of kindness had just caught the attention of the most powerful woman in the city. Jerome caught the late bus home, still wearing damp clothes from the rescue. His work boots squished with every step. His hands were finally regaining feeling. At the corner store, he used his last $20 to buy ingredients for dinner. Rice, canned vegetables, enough to make something filling for the girls. Why are you all wet? Asked Mr. Rodriguez, the store owner. Jerome just shrugged. Helped some folks out. He didn't mention the storm. Didn't talk about carrying 2 people 6 blocks through deadly weather. Jerome wasn't the type to make himself sound heroic. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor was in the back of her town car making very different phone calls. David, I need you to run a complete background check on someone named Jerome Williams. Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. Is this business-related, Mrs. Manchester? No, Eleanor said, watching the city blur past her window. It's personal. Very personal. What kind of information do you need? Everything. Employment history, financial situation, family background, character references. I want to know who this man really is. Eleanor paused, thinking about Jerome's refusal to take money, about the way he'd helped that family in the shelter. And David? Cancel tomorrow's board meeting. I have something more important to handle. Jerome arrived home to find his daughters pressed against the window, watching for him. Daddy! Zara ran to hug him. You're so late. We were worried. Sorry, sweetheart. Got caught in the storm helping someone. As Jerome fumbled for his keys, he found something taped to his door. An eviction notice. His stomach dropped. Rent was 3 days overdue. Jerome quickly tore down the notice and stuffed it in his pocket before the girls could see it. What was that paper, Daddy? Keisha asked. Just junk mail, baby. Nothing important. But it was important. Very important. Jerome had until Monday to come up with rent money or they'd lose their home. While Jerome was hiding his family's crisis, Eleanor was pulling up to her mansion. Tommy was finally warm and safe, but he couldn't stop talking about Superman Jerome. Grandma, can Jerome come to our house? Tommy asked. Eleanor smiled. Maybe sooner than you think, sweetheart. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Initial research complete. Jerome Williams, 34, widowed father of 2, former construction foreman. Currently works 3 part-time jobs, no criminal record. Neighbors describe him as the guy who fixes everyone's problems. The financial situation appears difficult. Eleanor read the message twice. Then she typed back, I want a full proposal on my desk by morning. Housing assistance, job creation, community development. Start with the Riverside neighborhood. That night, Jerome tucked his daughters into bed, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. And Eleanor Manchester sat in her study, looking at a photo of Tommy and planning something that would shock even her own board of directors. Both of them were thinking about the same thing. The moment when a stranger became a hero. But only one of them knew what came next. 3 days later, when Jerome opened his door to find a woman in a black town car, he had no idea he was about to discover the true identity of the grandmother he saved. Jerome was in his backyard trying to fix a neighbor's broken fence for $20, money he desperately needed for groceries. His phone had been disconnected that morning. Couldn't afford the bill. When the black town car pulled up outside his duplex, neighbors started gathering on their porches. Cars like that didn't come to Riverside. A well-dressed Asian woman with a clipboard stepped out. She walked straight to Jerome's front door and knocked. Are you Jerome Williams? She asked. Jerome set down his hammer. He was suspicious. People in expensive suits usually meant trouble. Depends who's asking, he said. If this is about late payments... I'm Sarah Carter, executive assistant to Eleanor Manchester. Jerome blinked. Eleanor? The lady from the storm? Mrs. Manchester would like to meet with you. She has a proposal. A proposal? Jerome wiped his hands on his work shirt. She already tried to pay me. I told her it wasn't necessary. Sarah smiled. Mr. Williams, do you know who Eleanor Manchester is? Jerome shrugged. A nice grandmother who got caught in a blizzard? Sarah pulled out her tablet and showed Jerome a photo. Eleanor in a business suit, standing at a corporate podium. The caption read, Manchester Foundation CEO announces $200 million community investment initiative. Jerome stared at the screen. That's really her? She's the founder and CEO of Manchester Foundation, the largest philanthropic organization in the state. Jerome sat down hard on his front steps. The hammer slipped from his hands. I carried how much did you say? $200 million in community investments last year alone. Jerome's head was spinning. You're telling me that the grandmother I helped is worth... The Manchester Foundation manages over $1 billion in assets, Sarah said gently. Eleanor Manchester is one of the most powerful women in the country. Sarah showed Jerome another photo. The Meridian Financial Building where he worked as a janitor. You clean this building, right? Yeah, that's my day job. How did you... Her foundation owns it. They're converting it to affordable housing and job training centers. Jerome felt like the world was tilting. She owns the building where I work? Not owned. Her foundation bought it last month. They're planning a complete renovation of your neighborhood. Sarah swiped to another photo. Architectural plans showing Riverside transformed. New housing, community centers, green spaces. Jerome recognized his own street in the plans. Wait, he said slowly. That's my neighborhood they're talking about renovating. Exactly. Sarah showed him another photo. Eleanor with a man in military uniform and a young boy. This is Tommy's father. Captain Michael Manchester. He died serving overseas 2 years ago. Jerome touched the photo. That little boy lost his dad. Tommy is Eleanor's only grandchild, her entire world. When you saved him, you saved the future of the Manchester legacy. The weight of what Sarah was saying hit Jerome like a truck. I just saw a scared kid who needed help. That's exactly why Mrs. Manchester wants to meet with you. Sarah pulled out a thick folder. She had us research your background. Jerome stood up, defensive. What kind of research? Employment history, character references, community involvement. Sarah opened the folder and read, former construction foreman. 8 years of perfect attendance. Laid off due to company downsizing. Widowed father of 2 daughters. Volunteers at the community center. Never been arrested. Neighbors describe you as the guy who fixes everyone's problems. Jerome felt exposed, vulnerable. She also knows about your wife, Sarah. I'm sorry for your loss. Jerome's eyes filled with tears. Why would she dig into all that? Because Eleanor Manchester doesn't just say thank you, Mr. Williams. She changes lives. Sarah closed the folder and looked at Jerome directly. She'd like you to come to her estate tomorrow at 2 p.m. Her estate? Jerome looked down at his work clothes, his calloused hands. I don't think I belong in a place like that. Mr. Williams, after what you did, you belong anywhere you want to be. Jerome was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. What could she possibly want from someone like me? She wants to discuss your future, and your daughter's futures. Jerome's head snapped up. My daughters? Among other things. Will you come? Jerome looked at his duplex, at the eviction notice hidden in his pocket, at his neighbors watching from their porches. Can I bring my daughters? I don't have childcare. Sarah smiled. Mrs. Manchester specifically hoped you would. Tommy's been asking about Superman Jerome every day. Jerome stood there trying to process it all. The woman he'd carried through the storm was one of the most powerful people in the state. She owned his workplace. She was planning to renovate his neighborhood, and now she wanted to meet with him. There's one more thing, Sarah said before getting back in the car. What's that? That construction company that laid you off? Hartwell Construction? What about them? They filed for bankruptcy last week. Poor management and cutting corners on safety. Jerome nodded. He wasn't surprised. Eleanor's foundation is looking for an experienced foreman to oversee the Riverside renovation project. Jerome's mouth fell open. Are you saying... I'm not saying anything, Mr. Williams. But Eleanor Manchester doesn't believe in coincidences. Sarah handed him a card with an address. She believes in opportunity. As the town car drove away, Jerome stood in his yard holding the card. His daughter Zara came outside. Daddy, who was that fancy lady? Jerome looked at the card, then at his neighborhood, then at his daughter. I honestly don't know, baby. But I think our lives just got a lot more interesting. That night, Jerome couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Sarah had said. Eleanor Manchester. $200 million. The most powerful woman in the state. And he'd carried her through a blizzard like she was any other grandmother who needed help. Tomorrow, he will learn what that really meant. When Jerome walked through the gates of the Manchester estate, he thought he was just returning a pair of gloves. He had no idea he was about to receive an offer that would transform not just his life, but his entire community. Jerome's beat-up Honda Civic looked like a toy next to the mansion. Wrought iron gates, manicured gardens, a house that could fit his entire neighborhood block. Daddy, is this a castle? Zara asked, pressing her face to the window. Something like that, sweetheart. Keisha was quiet, taking it all in. Are we rich now, Daddy? Jerome laughed nervously. No, baby. We're just visiting. A butler in a crisp uniform greeted them at the front door. Mr. Williams, Mrs. Manchester is expecting you. Jerome felt underdressed in his cleanest jeans and button-down shirt, but the butler treated him like royalty. Eleanor met them in the foyer. She looked completely different from the frightened woman in the storm. confidence, commanding, every inch the powerful executive. But when she saw Jerome, her face softened. "Jerome," she said warmly, "you came." Before Jerome could respond, Tommy came running down the marble staircase. "Superman Jerome! You came to my house!" Tommy hugged Jerome's legs. The boy looked healthy and happy, a complete transformation from the scared child in the blizzard. "Hey there, buddy," Jerome said. "How are you feeling?" "Great! Grandma says you're a hero." Eleanor smiled, watching Jerome with his daughters. "You must be Zara and Keisha. Tommy's told me so much about your daddy." The girls were shy at first, overwhelmed by the grandeur. But Eleanor had a way of making them feel comfortable. "Tommy, why don't you show the girls your playroom? I need to talk to their father." As the children ran off, Eleanor led Jerome to her private study. The walls were lined with awards, photos with politicians and celebrities, certificates of achievement. "Jerome," Eleanor said, closing the door, "I brought you here to return these." She held out the leather gloves she'd left at the shelter. Jerome smiled. "You didn't need to do all this just for gloves, ma'am." "Actually, I did." Eleanor gestured for Jerome to sit. "Because I have something important to discuss with you." Jerome settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Do you know what the Manchester Foundation does?" Eleanor asked. "Charity work, I guess?" Eleanor pulled out a thick binder. "We invest $200 million annually in community development, affordable housing, job training programs, small business support." She opened the binder to show photographs of completed projects, transformed neighborhoods, smiling families in new homes. "But we've been missing something crucial," Eleanor continued. "Authentic community leadership." Jerome listened, still not understanding where this was going. Eleanor leaned forward. "When you carried Tommy and me through that storm, you didn't just save our lives. You showed me what real leadership looks like." "Ma'am, anyone would have—" "No, Jerome. They wouldn't." Eleanor's voice was firm. "I've met thousands of people in my career. Politicians, CEOs, community leaders. But I've never met anyone who acted without hesitation the way you did." Eleanor pulled out architectural plans. Jerome recognized his neighborhood. "This is the Riverside Renovation Project. 500 families will be affected. $50 million in investment." Jerome's eyes widened. "50 million? In my neighborhood?" "I can write checks," Eleanor said, "but I can't earn trust." "Can't. You already have that trust." Eleanor stood and walked to the window overlooking her gardens. "Jerome, I want you to become the Director of Community Development for the Riverside Project." The words hit Jerome like a physical blow. "Director? Ma'am, I don't have a college degree. I'm just a construction worker." "You have something more valuable. You understand what these communities need because you live it every day." Eleanor turned back to face him. $85,000 annual salary, full health benefits, housing allowance. Jerome's hands started shaking. That's more than I made as a foreman. Plus funding for your daughter's education, full scholarships through college." Jerome stood up, pacing. "Mrs. Manchester, I don't understand why you're doing this." Eleanor's expression became personal, vulnerable. "Because Tommy sees you as a hero, and he's right." But more than that, she showed Jerome detailed plans for the community center, the job training programs, the small business incubation space. This renovation will work or fail based on community buy-in. Developers have tried to gentrify Riverside before. They failed because they didn't understand the people. Jerome studied the plans. He could see his neighborhood transformed, but not destroyed, enhanced. "You want to do this without pushing people out?" "Exactly. New community center with job training programs, affordable housing that doesn't displace current residents, small business support for local entrepreneurs." Eleanor pointed to employment projections. 47 new jobs in the first phase. Average wage increase of 40% for participating families. Jerome was overwhelmed. But what if I mess it up? Eleanor smiled. The same instincts that saved Tommy will guide these decisions. You'll have a full support team. Urban planners, social workers, financial analysts. But the vision, the community connection, that's all you. Jerome thought about his daughters, about the eviction notice in his pocket, about the dreams he'd abandoned when Sarah died. There's something else, Eleanor said softly. Tommy's been having nightmares since his father died. But after meeting you, he talks about being brave like Superman Jerome. Jerome felt his throat tighten. I think you both could benefit from staying in each other's lives. Eleanor walked to her desk and pulled out a contract. We'll start slowly. Shadow me for a month. Learn the systems. The first project is hiring local contractors for the renovation. Jerome realized the full scope. You want me to hire my community to rebuild my community? Exactly. And pay them well to do it. Jerome looked at the contract. His name is already typed in. Jerome Williams, Director of Community Development. When do I start? He asked. Eleanor extended her hand. Welcome to the Manchester Foundation, Director Williams. As they shook hands, Jerome felt like his whole world was shifting. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. We'll need an office in the Riverside community. I'm thinking that the duplex next to yours might be perfect after we renovate it. Jerome laughed, tears in his eyes. I still can't believe this is real. Believe it, Eleanor said, and get ready. Everything changes tomorrow. 6 months later, the transformation of Riverside was so dramatic that news crews came from 3 states away. But the real story was what happened to the families whose lives Jerome had quietly changed. One person at a time. The local news van pulled up to what used to be an empty lot. Now it was a bustling construction site with a sign, Williams Community Center, opening fall 2025. Reporter Michelle Santos adjusted her microphone. I'm here with Jerome Williams, the man whose act of kindness during last winter's blizzard led to the most successful community development project our city has ever seen. Jerome stood in his hard hat and suit jacket, reviewing construction plans with his crew. He still looked uncomfortable with the attention. Director Williams, how does it feel to be rebuilding your own neighborhood? Jerome smiled. Feels like coming home, but with the tools to actually fix what's been broken. The camera panned across the construction site. Local residents working alongside professional contractors. People Jerome had known his whole life, now earning good wages building their community's future. Tony Martinez, the disabled veteran, walked over in his supervisor vest. 6 months ago, I was collecting disability and feeling useless. Jerome gave me purpose again. The reporter turned to Mrs. Carter's son, David, connecting electrical wiring on the new community center. David just completed our electrical training program. He's now making 40% more than his previous job. Jerome's old construction crew from Hartwell had joined the project too. Men who'd been unemployed for months now had steady work and benefits. The statistics flashed on screen. 47 local residents employed. Average wage increases 40%. 0 families displaced. But the numbers only told part of the story. Maria Santos unlocked the door to her renovated apartment. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, new heating system. The rent was actually lower than her old place. My kids have their own rooms for the first time, she said, tears in her eyes. Jerome made sure the new housing was for us, not to replace us. Down the street, elderly couple Robert and Betty Johnson were tending their new garden plot. They'd lived in Riverside for 40 years and had been planning to move when gentrification rumors started. We thought we'd have to leave, Betty said. But Jerome fought to keep longtime residents here. Now our grandchildren can afford to live in the neighborhood where we raised their parents. The crown jewel was the Williams Community Center, named by unanimous neighborhood vote despite Jerome's protests. On opening day, Eleanor cut the ribbon alongside Jerome's daughters and Tommy. The center buzzed with activity. Computer classes for adults, construction training programs, after-school tutoring where Zara and Keisha now spent their afternoons. "My daddy helps everybody," Zara told the news reporter. "Now he has helpers too." The small business incubation program had already launched 6 new enterprises. The corner store had expanded into a full grocery. A former teacher opened a cafe that became the neighborhood's unofficial meeting place. Jerome's own business had evolved too. Williams Community Contractors was now a full-service company employing 12 people from the neighborhood. But perhaps the biggest change was in the schools. Principal Williams, no relation, showed off the new construction trades program. Jerome designed this curriculum himself. High school students learned job skills while helping with community projects. 16-year-old Marcus held up a certificate. "I'm going to work for Mr. Williams after graduation." He says good construction workers can write their own ticket. The media attention kept growing. Local newspapers, regional magazines, national foundations want to replicate the Riverside model. Jerome spoke at the National Conference on Urban Development, though he still seemed uncomfortable with the spotlight. "This isn't about one person getting lucky," he told the audience of city planners and foundation executives. "This is about what happens when communities invest in their own people." Eleanor watched from the audience, pride evident on her face. The ripple effects extended beyond Riverside. 3 other neighborhoods had requested Manchester Foundation partnerships using Jerome's Community Insider leadership model. Property values in Riverside increased, but not at the expense of current residents. The foundation's innovative ownership structure ensured long-term affordability. Crime decreased by 30%. High school graduation rates increased by 25%. Local business revenue was up 60%. But for Jerome, the real measure of success wasn't in statistics. It was in Sunday dinners where Eleanor and Tommy were regular guests, in watching Tommy confidently tell other kids about his Uncle Jerome, in seeing his daughters plan their college futures without financial worry. "Some families are chosen, not born," Eleanor often said, watching Jerome teach Tommy basic construction skills in his backyard workshop. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Spiritual. A community that had learned to expect disappointment now believed in possibility, and at the center of it all was a man who'd simply done what he thought was right on a snowy day, never imagining it would change hundreds of lives. Jerome still walked through the neighborhood every evening with his daughters. Now he pointed out improvements they'd helped create. "Remember when this was just an empty lot?" he'd ask. "Now it's where dreams come true," Keisha would answer. And somehow that didn't sound like an exaggeration anymore. 2 years later, on a snowy December afternoon, Jerome was walking from his foundation office when he heard a familiar sound, someone calling for help in a snowstorm. Jerome adjusted his professional winter coat and checked his watch. 4 p.m. on a Friday. The Williams Community Center's annual Heroes in the Storm dinner was starting in 2 hours. He was walking to his SUV when he heard it. "Help! Someone please help us!" Jerome turned toward the voice. A young Hispanic man was standing next to a broken-down sedan, holding a toddler. An elderly woman sat in the passenger seat, shivering. Jerome didn't hesitate. Same instincts, same heart. "What's the situation?" he asked, approaching them. "Our car died," the young man said frantically. "My grandmother can't walk in this weather, and my daughter has a fever. We don't have money for a tow truck." Jerome looked at the family. He saw himself 2 years ago, desperate, scared, needing help. "Come on," Jerome said, leading them to his warm SUV. "Let's get you somewhere safe." As he helped the elderly woman into his vehicle, the young man stared at him. "I don't know how to thank you, sir." Jerome smiled, starting the engine and turning up the heat. "Just paying it forward. Someone helped me once when I needed it." From the back seat, Zara and Keisha watched their father help strangers. It was a scene they'd witnessed countless times. "Daddy, you're doing the Superman thing again," Zara said. Jerome laughed. That's not Superman, honey. That's just being a neighbor. Can we help too? Keisha asked. You already are, sweetheart. Just by caring. An hour later, the Williams Community Center was packed for the annual dinner. Eleanor stood at the podium as keynote speaker. 2 years ago, a man proved that heroes don't wear capes, she said. They wear work boots. They carry tool pouches, and they see neighbors where others see strangers. The audience applauded as Jerome entered with the family he'd just helped. He'd gotten them to a mechanic, paid for their repairs, and invited them to dinner. Tommy, now 8 years old, presented awards to community volunteers. He moved with confidence, no longer the scared child from the blizzard. My Uncle Jerome taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared, Tommy said into the microphone. It's about helping people even when you are scared. Eleanor watched Jerome from across the room. He was introducing the family he'd helped to other community members, making sure they felt welcome. You know what I love most about your father? Eleanor said to Zara and Keisha, who were sitting at her table. What, Grandma Ellie? Keisha asked. He's the same man who saved Tommy and me in that blizzard. Success didn't change his heart. Jerome approached their table, the young man from earlier beside him. Everyone, this is Miguel. He's looking for work. Thinks he might be interested in our construction training program. Jerome's extended family had grown to include the Manchester family permanently. Eleanor was officially foundation grandmother to his daughters. Tommy spent summers learning construction skills. As the evening wound down, Jerome walked home through the transformed neighborhood with Eleanor and all 3 children. Snow was falling gently. Not threatening this time, just beautiful. That blizzard didn't change my life, Jerome reflected, watching his daughters and Tommy build a snowman. It revealed what my life was meant to be. Eleanor linked her arm through his. Sometimes the storm is what leads you home. They stood together, watching the children play in the snow, community lights glowing warm in the windows of renovated homes. The legacy of kindness continued, one act of compassion at a time. Jerome's story reminds us that heroism isn't about having superpowers, it's about having the courage to act when someone needs help. Think about it. Jerome had every reason to walk away that day. He was struggling financially. His family needed him. He could have said, someone else will help them. But he didn't. And that choice didn't just save 2 lives. It transformed an entire community. Every day, you pass by chances to be someone's Jerome. Maybe it's helping a neighbor with groceries, listening to a friend going through a tough time, or simply seeing someone who feels invisible. The person you help today might not be a millionaire CEO, but they're someone's Eleanor, someone's Tommy, someone who matters. Your moment to be a hero might come during a blizzard, or it might come on an ordinary Tuesday. Either way, will you be ready? Share this story if it reminds you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Tell us in the comments about a time someone helped you when you needed it most. Like this video if you believe kindness is contagious. Subscribe for more stories that prove good people still exist. And remember, you never know when your moment will come.
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.